But now we're going to move on to part 2 of our panel discussion. For part 2, we will look at some practical examples within the racing and betting world. So please welcome to the stage Nick Rust, the Chief Executive of the British Horse Racing Authority, Guillaume Dolbeau, the Head of Digital and Innovation for PMU, Bernard Marantelli, Founder and CEO of Colussusbet, Ed Comins, the President of Watch and Wager, and Mikael Kudren, the Digital Development Manager for ATG. Now, if we could start off with Guillaume, who has worked with Annalou at the Innovation Factory when you set up the PMU Lab for Innovation. So tell us a bit more about how well that's worked for you.
Well, in fact, 2 years ago, we discussed with the top management of the PMU, and even if in the past we had been implementing many innovations in terms of services or in terms of products, we thought that it would be perhaps interesting to go further on and then to imagine what could be the future in terms of new services, new products, things that would not exist at the moment. And so we created a PMU Lab, which is a dedicated team regarding innovation in the PMU. And we are working with the Innovation Factory, managed by Anne. In fact, we ask and we work with the students of the Innovation Factory in order to imagine what could be services, products, applications regarding our activity. So mainly for horse betting, but we can also ask for sports or poker. And so we have in the process currently, we've got some ideas that, as Anne said, with the Accor hotel cases, we have prototypes that we are building with the students, and that we will be able to test in the near future. So that's quite interesting. So our playground is mixing either technology and customer experience. In fact, if we find an interesting technology or a good idea abroad or in a startup, but there is no use case in terms of customer experience, then we won't work on it. We always want to mix either technology and customer experience.
Well, we'll be watching with interest, and it'll be good to see how some of those ideas come to fruition. Moving on to Mikael, you've also set up ATG's Innovation Lab recently. So how does your methodology and approach compare to what we've heard so far today?
We've just started up, so we're a really small team. We want to have both a small dedicated team, but also use the talents in-house to both for their sake, so they keep getting inspiration and try new emerging technologies and try new user experiences. So we're currently working on three different projects, and for us, the essence is what Anne was talking about, making it cheap to fail. So make prototypes, see if things fly before we spend 2 years building it and adapting to all the legislations and everything.
Great. Well, we'll be hearing more from Mikael later when he presents the website vision for ATG. Moving on to Bernard. Bernard, as a successful entrepreneur and the founder of Colossus, you're well experienced with bringing new concepts to life. But how do you go about ensuring that you can protect your intellectual property and making sure that innovation isn't just simply copied by the competition?
I might reclassify myself as successful or not, but depends how you judge that. I think you've got a few opportunities. You can try to do it in a legal sense with patents. You can try to do it with naming, branding, trademarks, those sorts of things, but they're not that easy many times in sort of a cash poor startup environment. So I think you have to try and move fast and be ahead of people, and you have to look at liquidity measures, whether that's volumes, maybe if you're a pool or a parimutuel, or whether it's a client base that will interact and talk to each other. So liquidity in some capacity, and it's kind of flattering to be replicated, and I think it's a very double-edged sword to be replicated, because when you are, people say, well, your innovation is now credible. You know, our innovation, well, one of our main innovations was what we call partial cash out. And when Bet365 launched partial cash out, suddenly a lot of people who were sort of a real watching brief on us were suddenly knocking back on the door and say, let's talk to you. So I think replication to an extent is good because it increases your credibility. But if so many replicate, or they replicate to the extent that you're no longer required, I think it can turn nasty quickly if you don't have some legal or liquidity measure protecting you.
Well, the cash out example is really interesting because obviously that was a core feature of Colossus originally, and now we're seeing more and more betting companies embrace that as one of the major innovations, along with in-play betting. Now, Nick, you referred to both of those examples earlier, but racing as a product, it doesn't exist in the digital environment in that sense. So how can racing as a sport ensure that it continues to be relevant as customer demands, the social environment and expectations evolve?
I think you got a clue earlier. A lot of it's about opening it up and making it inclusive and participative. One of the attractions originally, you know, 30 years ago for people getting involved in betting was on racing, was the mystique of it all. You had to learn a new language. People don't have time to do that today. They have other interests. They can't dedicate the time to doing that. We have to make it more relevant in the digital world. Opening up, we've had open stewards inquiries around key races, one very topical one in the last few weeks for some time now, and I think that adds to the accessibility of the sport, but we're still doing that in a way that goes through traditional channels at the moment. So we're looking at technology at the moment in and around stewards' rooms to show the full goings-on. You know, if you're interested on a day-to-day basis, why shouldn't you see the goings-on in there? Obviously, certain aspects have to be restricted. We're looking at how we create sectional timing, horse tracking, the ability to give, to use technology to display, analyze, and provide real-time access to racing using technology such as Hawkeye and so on as well. All of which is designed to open it up and make it more interesting. But fundamentally, horse racing, certainly in Great Britain and in many other places in the world, is a sport of personality, of people, of heroes, and we need to give access into their world. One of the most powerful things that happened in the last 6 months, funnily enough, it was with Aidan Coleman again. He's involved in everything, Aidan. Aidan was in a runner in one of the big feature chases at the Grand National meeting, the Topham Chase, and he was wearing the helmet cam. And unfortunately, like most of the runners in that race that day, 2/3 of the runners didn't complete. He was unseated and he was sitting in the ditch at the foot of the fence, and you know, consoling his horse, getting the horse back on its feet. What a great insight! It had something like 25,000 hits within a day. Looking at that, and we just need to open it up and make the human and equine side more accessible, and then start to plug it into the betting side. Betting on racing, I'm not suggesting we're going to change the rules to such that, you know, the 10th place horse is being fought over at full tilt between two jockeys because there's match betting all the way down. But the rules of racing are open to change to facilitate improvements in betting moving forward, and that's another area of focus for us.
It'll be very interesting to see how the latter develops in particular, but I thought it was interesting what you say, linking in with Per's comments about making more about the personalities. We've heard a lot about, you know, making the most of racing's personalities at previous editions of the Racing and Betting Forum. But now that we have so much interactivity with customers, both existing and potential customers, via social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, then there's no excuse for us not to take advantage of that, I think. Now, Ed, how does the US model compare? Is the focus there more in terms of the off-track wagering rather than the customer experience? What's your priority when it comes to innovation?
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I think when we moved our business to the US, to San Francisco 4 years ago, everyone said, you're completely mad, Ed. You know, a lot of British companies have failed in the US, and you'll get eaten up by Churchill Downs or TVG or whoever. So we did have to innovate. We did have to look at it in a different way. We couldn't just move the business and just do the same thing. So the first thing we did was acquire the racetrack here at Cal Expo in Sacramento. I've been running that for 3.5 years, very successfully. But what it gave us in the US market is a tremendous amount of leverage. And to innovate in the US, it's very, very regulated. So sometimes it's more commercial innovation. You've got to think on your feet, and you're doing deals a deal to do another, to grandfather you in for another deal. It's much more that sort of type of business. So you've got to be commercially innovative. I think the other thing that's going on in the US is, in terms of our business, is technical innovation. As some of you know, we are the first company to, the very first company to commingle directly into the Hong Kong Jockey Club with the biggest pools in the world, which has been going very successfully. We've had to innovate there in terms of the amount of tracks that we're covering around the world, but also, most importantly, the speed of processing of wagers with our partners, AMTA International, who are the market leaders in the US. We've majorly improved the speed of processing bets into global markets, and that's been very successful. So, you know, the US is a tricky place because you've got a lot of regulation, a lot of people trying to stop you doing things, but we've been very flexible and tripled our turnover this year.
As you say, it's very interesting when you compare the US to other territories, the importance of taking a customer-centric approach is not always easy when you're faced with all that regulation and you're bound by red tape. So interesting to see your experiences about how you bring those ideas to fruition. A question perhaps for both Guillaume and Mikael. Interested to know about how innovation's integrated within the culture of your companies. Do you have a specific budget committed to innovation? How do you measure the return on investment? Does it remain the responsibility of a few individuals, or are we looking at it being infused through the whole organization?
So yes, we've got a dedicated budget. No figures. We've got, as I said, a dedicated team. So I'm part of the team, and I'm closely working with someone in the IT team, plus 2 or 3 other person. In fact, we work closely together because either we have to find the good ideas. So sometimes they come just from us. Sometimes they just come from students, from customers, from startups that we can meet, and then, well, we shake everything together, and then we try to find the good idea that could come to an experiment. So a dedicated budget, dedicated persons. I'm working 100% on this innovation theme, and so I'm belonging to the marketing department. So we are discussing closely with my boss and the top management about the ideas, all the experiments that we are willing to do, or the results that we collect. Then, so this is more for outside innovations. Then on the other hand, internally, there has been a new process that has been set up, which allows all people from the company to imagine, propose, suggest ideas, either to improve their day-to-day work in terms of innovations, or they also can propose ideas of innovations for the business. And then in that case, those ideas, we will, through the PMU Lab, experiment them and perhaps one day put them on the market.
Great. And for yourself, Mikael, how does that compare?
So far, the Innovation Lab doesn't have a budget of its own, but the company as a whole has a budget for new initiatives. So we apply for money for each project. We are currently only like 3 people working dedicated on the team, which 2 are consultants. And most of our development department has been busy building our new digital platform and website now for the past 1.5 years. So, but we strive to make it something in the culture of the entire company, not to have the innovation guys just locked up in a room. Even if we want, I think we need a mix. You need some dedicated people, you need the off-site feeling, you need to bring in people from other companies or to get a mix. But I think it shouldn't be like everybody's doing boring stuff and then there are these few guys doing the cool stuff. So we try to create a culture of innovation.
I think that's important, that it has to go throughout the organization, and there needs to be a real commitment, both in terms of the financial investment, but also time. As we heard from the last panel discussion, you know, it does take time to bring these things through to fruition, so it needs a commitment from all employees, all stakeholders. And on that point, we have a question from the floor again, submitted via the web app. This one's for you, Nick. Are horsemen getting involved in the innovations and improvements that you're working on through your strategy for growth? Do they understand the audience properly and effectively? And how you deal with some of those different interest groups?
Well, the short answer is yes. One of the really useful things about joining the British horse racing industry is that although there isn't a vertically integrated structure for it, those 85,000 people across who are employed or directly or indirectly in the sport, together with the people who own horses, train horses and so on, come from many, many different backgrounds. So we have the opportunity of many different ideas and experiences to draw upon. And the work that was kicked off last year on the strategy for growth involved a core group of people from across the industry and outside the industry who had a love for it, a core group of 50 people working on 6 key development areas. In a sense then, whilst a lot of the work was done without payment. It was done through giving work to assist with the cause, if you like, from those outside. Those 50 people engaged 300 across the sport, including horsemen. I think horsemen are willing to make progress, but of course they are most likely to be the traditionalists. In many cases, there is a new group of young trainers and owners joining the sport, but the vast majority have been involved in this with all their lives. So they're desperate to see the progress, but they also have the tradition. So we have to work harder with them, engaging them in the process moving forwards. And the second part was, sorry.
It was just about bringing those interest groups together.
Yeah, sure, and I think it's environment and common cause. So when I joined the British Horse Racing Authority, with this emerging strategy was being developed, which I've had a hand in. Up until that point, for the last 3 or 4 years, the industry didn't have a clear strategy around a number of areas. So that common cause is being brought into, and we're now on the process of developing it through.
Again, it's a really interesting journey that the BHA are embarking on, so we'll be following it with great interest, I'm sure. You mentioned there that the traditionalists, and we all have them within any organization, are the ones that are most resistant to change. They're not necessarily open to new ideas or progressive, but I think that goes for organizations as well, both large and small. Do you think, Bernard, the size of organization dictates whether you're more likely to be a fast-moving, progressive, early adopter, or whether you'll be a risk-averse laggard, always playing catch-up?
I think it does in an indirect way. I mean, a lot of people speak about the ecosystem of innovation inside a culture, and I think the ecosystem is made out of the individuals, and you've really got to look at what's the individual risk profile. We heard a bit earlier people saying CEOs want to innovate, and people really low down in the company want to innovate, but the mid-tier don't. And I think the mid-tier don't because they're going to get fired if they do something wrong, and they're not going to be much better off if they do something right. They've all got a $500,000 asset base. They've all got a wife and 2 kids and public school fees. And so I think the risk profile of the individual within the ecosystem makes their risk profile poor, makes consensus unlikely to be obtained. If there is a panel of 5 people in a room and someone starts to say, yeah, good idea, let's do this, and the next bloke, yeah, let's do it, and you get around to about the 4th person on the table and he says, oh, I'm not so sure, the first 3 who said yes will go, oh, yeah, you're right, actually. So to try and get through everybody in a corporation which is a bit larger is very difficult. And I mean, even Mikael has just mentioned, you know, he says we've got 3 people in innovation, 1 of them's internal, 2 of them's consultant. The risk profile of consultants, they don't have a job, to be fair. So they're going to take a risky job because they don't currently have one. And the people inside a company say, you want to go into innovation and probably get fired when you achieve nothing in 3 years, or you want to stay in your safe job where you're 10% down, you can blame the market and you keep your job. I think it really comes down to the individuals, which is then a function of the size of the company.
I think you're right. A lot of that comes down to that fear of failure that we were talking about earlier, and that then fuels whether people and individuals are risk averse. And on that point, Ed, where do you feel that you're able to innovate and fail, as we talked about in the last panel discussion? How do you measure your return on investment?
Yeah, we're a pretty lean and mean organization in the US, so we certainly don't have a budget for innovation. I think it's a cultural thing. I'll give you an example. When American Pharaoh passed the post in the Triple Crown this year, which was probably the greatest thing for US racing for, well, 37 years, but been fantastic. Yeah, my staff, it was Saturday, 6:37 Eastern. They weren't in the office, you know, they were probably having a couple of beers and enjoying the race. But they were straight on Twitter, they were straight on the Twitter feed. It's a cultural thing. They were going out on Facebook, working through the weekend almost to try and push that message. And the point I'm trying to make is it's a cultural thing. If you feel that the business is going forward, you feel motivated to do it. The fact that they're big racing guys obviously helps as well, but that was great. And to answer the Swedish guy who, earlier on who kept swearing, American Pharaoh does have a website, is on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and has been great for the US.
That's a good point. We obviously had Frankel in the UK, and there's Trev going for the ARC hat trick on Sunday. So we do have our heroes that are celebrated. It's not always easy when they are only around for a year and then retire, but we do need to do more to celebrate. Well, thank you very much to all of our panel. Before we finish, can I just open it up to the floor if there are any other questions that haven't been submitted via our web app? Is there anyone who would like to ask a question of our panelists? No, in which case we'll move on. Risk averse, definitely, yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much to all of our panelists, to Nick, to Bernard, to Ed, to Guillaume, and to Mikael. Thank you very much.